Pilgrim, excerpts from Glenn Allen Cheney on Thanksgiving. The Crossing. Someone in this group kept a journal of the first year. It would return to England aboard the Fortean in December 1621. Within a year it would be published in London in 1622 under the title Mort's Relations. We do not know who Morton was. No one by that name went to America on the Mayflower. A.G. Mort signed to the readers an introduction to the book. It is widely supposed that name was a false one for a publisher named George Morton. The publishers may have used a false name because of the devious legalities of the separatist settlement and the possible guilt of association with anyone who promoted their venture. In all likelihood, the book had several authors, including a few letters signed with initials. 2 letters apparently by Robert Cushman and by the pastor John Robinson, and 1 by Edward Winslow. The narrative of the book, however, has no names or initials or indication of an author. This narrative, a journal, was divided into 5 parts. Report events from September 6, 1920, launch of the Mayflower and to an expedition to the Massachusetts tribe in September 1621. The most likely journalists was Edward Winslow and William Bradford. Governor John Carver may have contributed. The journal or journalists tend to write in the first person plural, we, and the third person plural, they. No one used the word I. The journalist may have written the narrative for various reasons. In the tradition of explorers, they have been reporting on events and discoveries. They have been reporting to their investors. They may have been trying to encourage more people to join the colony. As a real estate advertisement, however, it failed. It reports much suffering, alludes to much danger, and hints at the difficulty of starting from scratch under duress of a New England weather. Also, it falls short of the ideal history. It provides a bountiful information, but it leaves out such obvious, significant details as the dates of death. It mentions only a few people who died and nothing about griefs and burials. It reports little about the activities of daily life and the human conflicts that inevitably arise among people under great stress, except for a quick allusion to a conflict just before they landed at Cape Cod. It mentions no arguments or disagreements. It expresses no regrets, misgivings, or second thoughts. It really mentions women and children. It says nothing about hunger. It admits to considerable suffering, but we have to look between the lines to imagine the conditions that kill so many people in such a short time. If Mort's Relations sold any real estate, it was only by neglecting to mention the worst of their experience. Mort's Relations relates little about the voyage across the Atlantic. In 67 words, it takes us from the launch in September the 6th to the first sight of land on November the 9th. That last sentence brushes off 2 months of terror and hardship with 5 words. Many difficulties in boisterous storms. One of those many difficulties would be the sheer stress of knowing that they had pushed off 2 months later than they had planned. They would arrive on the verge of winter. With dwindling food supplies, no homes on shore, no friends outside their group, and no possibility of going back until, at best, spring. But the option of sailing toward difficulty seemed much better than the pressure pushing them from behind. Persecution by the king, financial demands from their backers, the sale of most of the possessions to pay for the trip, the lack of jobs and homes to go back to, The frustration of delays and the certainty that a cold and a hungry winter in a strange land was safer than worship with a pulpal flavor. While Morton's Relations tells us little about the voyage, another sort, William Bradford of Plymouth Plantation, 1620 through 1647, gives us more details. He tells us that for the first few days they sailed before a prosperous wind that did much to encourage them. But prosperous winds didn't keep them from throwing up all over the place. Restricted to the windowless gun deck and able to orient their balance in the horizon, the passengers suffered explosive bouts of seasickness. Without benefit of portholes or anything that would flush, they heaved their beer-soaked biscuits, their bit of cod, their oatmeal, pea podridge, and salted pork. Maybe Brewster offered up psalms to try to assure them. He shows by the sea what God has over man, what care God has over man. But when he delivers them out of great dangers of the sea, he delivers them as it were from 1,000 deaths. They mount up to the heavens. They go again into the depths. Their soul is melted because of trouble. And especially a Nazi sailor did everything he could to make things worse. He would always be condemning these poor people and with their sickness and cursing them daily with grievous, horrible words, and did not let to tell that he hoped to help cast half of them overboard before they came to their journey's end, and to make merry of what they had. And if he were by any gently reproved, he would curse and swear the more bitterly. But it pleased God, before they came halfway over, to smite this young man with a grievous disease, of which he died in a desperate manner. And so was himself the first that was thrown overboard. Thus his curses lit on his own head, and it was astonishing to all his fellows, for it was noted to be the just hand of God upon him. For the next 2 months the passengers would live in a dim, wet world that smelled of seawater, vomit, chamber pots, animal dung, unwashed clothes, and every aroma the human body could produce, not to mention whiffs of the wine, the tar, the fish, and the turpentine our cargoes passed. They heard men snore, women weep, children whine, an onk here and a cluck cluck there, sailors thumping around the deck above. They heard each other pray. They heard the shudder of the tiller as it swung back and forth at the rear of the gun deck. They heard a continuous creaking of wood that spoke of the condition of the ship, the mood of the sea, the strength of the wind. Sometimes the croaking and murmuring that all was well. Sometimes it screamed that man was not meant to go across the sail across the oceans. They read the tone of the sounds of the sailors to guess the ever-shifting degree of danger. When waves roared back and thunders across the upper deck, cold water dripped through the decking. During each 4 shifts, the sailors manned 2 pumps to draw the water out of the bilge up to the top deck, for most of it ran to the sea. But some of it dripped or trickled down to the passengers. The passengers were moist at the best of times, soaked at the worst of times, and never truly dry, not for a moment, from late September of 1620 until midwinter 1621. During calm weather, Master Jones may have let the passengers come up on the upper deck, the main deck, for a bit of air, light, and exercise. At any sight of bad weather or any need to work with the rigging, passengers had to descend immediately to the dim, dank, quarters. If bad weather threatened, the crew fit the lids over the hatch, letting the passengers ride out the storm on a dusty gun deck. The ship never stopped. It never dropped anchor. It never rested motionlessly. The passengers spent the entire voyage swinging between extremes of boredom and fear. Except for the occasional moment on deck, calm seas meant endless hours of sitting in one place, talking to the same people about a daily routine that would never change. But none would wish for more interesting weather. Winds brought waves that took the ship on a terrifying ride. The prosperous wind turned ferocious on the ship, sailed into the middle of hurricane season. By sheer luck, or was it a miracle, the Mayflower would spend over 2 months in the North Atlantic without getting hit by weather of hurricane strength. But something mighty strong hit them, and more than once. Somewhere mid-Atlantic, the Mayflower, so tall and solid at the deck, all but cowered under mountainous waves. At first the wind pushed her over so far that the main yard, the 50-foot horizontal yardam from which the mainsail hung, some 40 feet above the deck, would lean over and grab the water. As the water pushed at it, and it acted as a 25-foot lever that tugged violently at the mast, making the whole ship quiver or shudder and groan, as if trying not to tear in half. More than once Master Jones gave up trying to control the ship. When the wind grew too fierce, he gave the order to go at hull. Working in a murderous wind, the crew pulled down all sails and every possible piece of rigging, and reducing the ship not so much more than a hull with a barely waterproof lid. They latched everything down tight, battened the hatches, barred the doors, tucked themselves into the forecastle, put out the fire, and prayed for God to do what man could not do. This will be continued.